Imagine waking up one morning and suddenly realizing that nothing you do ultimately matters. Your career, your relationships, your achievements, all of it will eventually dissolve into cosmic dust. The universe doesn't care about your struggles, your dreams, or your existence. You are a tiny consciousness flickering briefly in an incomprehensibly vast cosmos that operates according to laws that have nothing to do with human meaning or purpose. This is absurdity, the recognition that life has no inherent meaning, and it should terrify you into paralysis or despair. Except, here's what the existential psychologists discovered: what if this apparent curse is actually the most profound gift you could ever receive? What if the very meaninglessness of existence is precisely what liberates you to create authentic meaning? Today, we're exploring one of psychology's most counterintuitive insights: how embracing life's fundamental absurdity doesn't lead to nihilistic despair, but to radical freedom, authentic living, and paradoxically, to the deepest form of meaning possible. And it all starts with understanding why your life's apparent meaninglessness might be the best thing that ever happened to you. To understand how absurdity became a gift, we need to travel back to post-World War II Europe, a continent traumatized by mechanized demise on an unprecedented scale. Millions had passed in gallows, on battlefields, in projected cities. The Enlightenment promise that human reason would lead to progress and civilization had been shattered. How could rational, educated, cultured societies have produced the Holocaust? How could life have any meaning in a world where humans could inflict such systematic horror on each other? Traditional religion offered answers that no longer satisfied. Science offered explanations, but no purpose. People were left staring into what Nietzsche had called the abyss, the terrifying recognition that there might be no cosmic meaning, no divine plan, no inherent purpose to human existence. Into this philosophical and psychological crisis stepped a group of thinkers who would revolutionize how we understand the human condition. Viktor Frankl emerged from Auschwitz with a radical insight that would become logotherapy, his school of existential psychoanalysis. Albert Camus, the French-Algerian philosopher who deeply influenced existential psychology, was writing about the absurd, the fundamental conflict between humanity's need for meaning, and the universe's apparent indifference. Rollo May was developing existential psychology in the Western world, arguing that anxiety wasn't just a symptom to be eliminated, but a fundamental feature of human freedom. Irvin Yalom would later synthesize these ideas into existential psychotherapy, placing the confrontation with meaninglessness at the center of psychological growth. But here's where it gets fascinating. These thinkers didn't conclude that life's meaninglessness meant we should despair or give up. They discovered something unexpected. The recognition of life's absurdity, when fully embraced rather than denied, becomes the foundation for authentic existence and genuine freedom. Frankl, who had every reason to conclude that life was meaningless after watching his family pass away in prison camps, and enduring unspeakable suffering himself, instead concluded the opposite. He wrote, "Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose." But here's the twist. He argued that meaning isn't something you discover out there in the universe. It's something you create through your choices, your commitments, and your responses to life's challenges, including and especially its absurdity. Camus put it even more starkly in his essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, which became a foundational text for understanding absurdity psychologically. He used the Greek myth of Sisyphus, condemned by the gods to eternally roll a boulder up a mountain, only to watch it roll back down, as the perfect metaphor for human existence. We build, we strive, we achieve, and then we fall away, and everything we built eventually crumbles. Our lives are Sisyphean, repetitive, ultimately futile in cosmic terms. But Camus' conclusion was shocking. He wrote, "One must imagine Sisyphus happy." Happy. How could someone in an inherently meaningless, repetitive existence be happy? This is where the gift of absurdity reveals itself. Let's explore deeper into the psychological mechanisms of absurdity and why it's actually liberating. Carl Jung, though not typically classified as an existentialist, understood this dynamic through his concept of the confrontation with meaninglessness as a necessary stage of individuation. Jung observed that many of his patients, particularly in midlife, experienced what he called the spiritual problem of modern man, a crisis where the meanings and purposes they had been living by suddenly felt hollow and arbitrary. This wasn't pathology. It was growth trying to happen. The psyche was demanding something more authentic than the socially prescribed meanings people had been unconsciously following. Rollo May expanded on this in his masterwork The Meaning of Anxiety, where he distinguished between normal and neurotic anxieties. Normal anxiety, what he called existential anxiety, arises from our awareness of life's fundamental uncertainties, our freedom, our mortality, and yes, the ultimate groundlessness of meaning. This unease can't be eliminated because it's built into the structure of human consciousness. We are beings who know we're going to pass away, who must make choices without certainty, who live in a universe that doesn't provide built-in purposes. Neurotic anxiety, by contrast, occurs when we try to deny or escape this existential apprehension. We become rigid, defensive, inauthentic. We cling to false certainties, externally imposed meanings, roles that feel safe but empty. The psychological insight here is profound. Most people spend their lives running from absurdity, from the recognition that nothing is guaranteed, that all meaning is contingent, that passing away makes everything ultimately impermanent. We construct elaborate defenses against this awareness. We convince ourselves that our particular belief system has captured absolute truth. We immerse ourselves in careers and acquisitions, hoping that enough success will make our lives matter. We follow social scripts about what a meaningful life looks like, hoping that conformity will protect us from existential vertigo. But these defenses exact a terrible cost. They require us to lie to ourselves, to deny what we know at the deepest level, that meaning isn't given but created, that certainty is an illusion, that we are radically free and therefore radically responsible for our existence. Now, here's where this gets really interesting, and you need to hear this part carefully because it's going to change how you think about every major decision in your life. What if I told you that every moment of dejection, every crisis of meaning, every time you've looked at your life and thought what's the point of any of this, wasn't a sign that something was wrong with you, but actually evidence that something was going profoundly right? What if those dark nights of the soul weren't obstacles to overcome, but invitations to receive the greatest gift existence offers? Stay with me, because understanding this next section might be the difference between living someone else's life and finally living your own. The transformation that absurdity offers happens in stages, and understanding these stages can help you recognize where you are in your own psychological and spiritual development. The first stage is what existential psychologists call the collapse of the inauthentic. You've been living according to meanings and purposes that you didn't consciously choose. Maybe you pursued a career because it was expected, maybe you adopted beliefs because your community held them, maybe you crafted a life that looks successful from the outside, but feels hollow inside. Then something happens. A crisis, a loss, a moment of unexpected clarity. And suddenly, the meanings you've been living by are revealed as arbitrary, constructed, ultimately groundless. This is terrifying. It feels like your entire world is collapsing. And it is? But what's collapsing isn't reality. It's the false certainty you built to protect yourself from reality. Irvin Yalom, one of the most influential existential therapists, describes this stage in his book, Existential Psychotherapy, as the confrontation with meaninglessness, one of what he calls the four ultimate concerns of human existence, along with life exploration, freedom, and isolation. Most people, when they hit this stage, panic? They desperately try to reconstruct certainty, to find new absolute meanings to cling to. They might jump from one ideology to another, one relationship to another, one distraction to another. But the ones who are brave enough to sit in the discomfort, to fully feel the vertigo of meaninglessness without immediately rushing to fill it with new certainties, these are the ones who discover the gift. The second stage is what Camus called the revolt. Once you recognize that the universe doesn't provide meaning, that there's no cosmic authority dictating what your life should be about, you face a choice. You can embrace nihilism, concluding that if nothing matters ultimately, then nothing matters at all, leading to despair and paralysis. Or you can revolt against the absurd, not by denying it but by creating meaning anyway, fully aware that this meaning is your creation, not a cosmic discovery. This is the revolt. It's saying to the indifferent universe, you don't give my life meaning. Fine. I'll create my own meaning, and I'll commit to it fully, not despite its ultimate groundlessness but because of it. This is where the gift becomes visible. When meaning isn't handed to you by religion, society, or cosmic law, when you can't appeal to any external authority to justify your choices, you become truly free. Free to choose what matters to you. Free to commit to values and purposes that resonate with your authentic self rather than ones imposed from outside. Free to change your mind if those meanings no longer serve you. You're no longer living someone else's idea of a meaningful life. You're authoring your own existence. Viktor Frankl saw this with crystal clarity in the prison camps. He observed that inmates who found personal meaning, who made the choice to live for something, whether reuniting with loved ones, bearing witness to atrocity, or simply preserving their human dignity, survived at much higher rates than those who couldn't find or create meaning in their suffering. The third stage is what we might call authentic commitment. This is crucial and often misunderstood. Embracing absurdity doesn't mean becoming detached, cynical, or refusing to take anything seriously. It means the opposite. It means committing fully to the meanings you create, knowing they're not cosmically guaranteed. You love deeply, knowing love ends in loss. You pursue your purpose passionately, knowing your achievements are temporary. You stand for your values firmly, knowing that they are your chosen values, not universal laws. There's a profound maturity in this. You're no longer a child waiting for cosmic parents to tell you what your life means. You're an adult taking full responsibility for creating and living meaning in an absurd world. Existential psychology reveals that this is actually when people report the deepest sense of meaning and fulfillment. Not when they're certain they've found the truth, but when they're creating their truth, while remaining aware of its constructed nature. There's a lightness to this, what Nietzsche called dancing in chains. Yes, we're constrained by biology, history, circumstance, passing. But within those constraints, we're free to move, to create, to choose. And the very fact that our meanings are our creations makes them more precious, not less. A meaning you've chosen and committed to after fully confronting life's absurdity, is worth infinitely more than a meaning you've passively inherited and never questioned. So how do you actually live with absurdity as a gift rather than a curse? Let's get practical, because this isn't just philosophical abstraction. This is about how you live your daily life. First, practice what existential therapists call bracketing, temporarily setting aside the question of whether your life has cosmic or ultimate meaning, and instead asking, what do I want to make meaningful? Not what should be meaningful according to some external standard, but what actually calls to you, what you genuinely care about when you're honest with yourself. This might be very different from what you thought you were supposed to care about. Second, embrace what Yalom calls engagement, throwing yourself fully into chosen commitments, even while maintaining awareness of their ultimate groundlessness. This is a delicate balance. You're simultaneously serious and playful, committed and free, purposeful and accepting. You might dedicate yourself to your work, not because you believe it will echo through eternity, but because it's meaningful to you now, because it allows you to express something authentic, because it contributes something valuable even if that value is temporary. The absurdity doesn't diminish the meaning. It intensifies it by removing false supports and making you responsible for meaning creation. Third, regularly engage in what Viktor Frankl called de-reflection, periods where you stop obsessing about meaning and just live, just engage with what's in front of you. Paradoxically, meaning often emerges most powerfully when we're not desperately searching for it, but when we're absorbed in activities, relationships, and experiences that engage us fully. The person asking, "What's the meaning of my life?" every 5 minutes is like someone constantly checking if they're happy. The very checking prevents the experience. Sometimes you need to just roll the boulder up the mountain, fully present to the task, and discover that the meaning is in the rolling itself. Fourth, cultivate what existential psychology calls tragic optimism, Frankl's term for maintaining hope and creating meaning even in the face of unavoidable suffering, guilt, and loss, what he called the tragic triad of human existence. This is not toxic positivity that denies suffering. It's the mature recognition that life contains unavoidable tragedy, and that meaning isn't found by avoiding tragedy but by how we respond to it. Some of the most meaningful human experiences emerge from our responses to suffering, loss, and limitation. The gift of absurdity includes this, that even suffering can be meaningful if you choose to make it so, not because suffering is inherently meaningful, but because you can decide what your relationship to suffering will be. Fifth, practice radical responsibility. Since the universe doesn't provide meaning, since there's no cosmic authority you can appeal to, you are entirely responsible for your existence. This is both terrifying and liberating. You can't blame the divine, fate, society, or your past for who you are and how you live. But you also can't be judged by those external standards. You're free to define for yourself what constitutes a life well lived. This doesn't mean rejecting all ethics or becoming selfish. Most people, when they truly take responsibility for their choices, become more ethical, not less. They recognize that their choices are more precise, because it is theirs to make. Sixth, embrace what Camus called lucidity, the clear-eyed recognition of absurdity without the consolations of hope or denial. This might sound discouraging, but Camus argued it's actually joyful. When you stop waiting for life to provide meaning, when you stop hoping that suffering will eventually make sense, when you accept that absurdity is permanent, you are freed from endless disappointment and resentment. You can say yes to life as it actually is, not as you wish it were. You can find beauty and meaning in temporary, fragile things, because you're not comparing them to some imagined permanent, absolute meaning. The sunset is breathtaking, not despite its impermanence, but because of it. Now we arrive at the deepest dimension of absurdity's gift, and this is where it becomes almost mystical, while remaining psychologically sound. When you fully embrace absurdity, when you stop clinging to false certainties and inherited meanings, something unexpected happens. You experience what Abraham Maslow, though not strictly an existentialist, called peak experiences. The moments of intense clarity, joy, and connection that feel deeply meaningful even though, you know they are temporary. You become capable of what Rollo May called ecstatic freedom, the joy of creating yourself, and your meanings in the face of nothingness. There's a profound paradox here that Carl Jung would have appreciated. Only by accepting that life has no inherent meaning, do you become free to experience life as deeply meaningful. Only by giving up the search for cosmic purpose, do you become present enough to create authentic purpose. Only by accepting your ultimate mortality, do you become capable of genuine connection and vitality. The gift of absurdity is this: it destroys who you're pretending to be so you can discover who you actually are. It strips away false meanings, so you can create true ones. It reveals that you're free in the most terrifying and exhilarating sense possible, free to make your life into whatever you choose to make it. This is what Nietzsche meant by his disturbing concept of eternal recurrence. He asked, what if you had to live your exact life over and over for eternity, every joy and every agony repeated infinitely? Would you curse this fate, or embrace it? The person who has accepted absurdity, who has created authentic meanings rather than clinging to inherited ones, who has taken full responsibility for their existence, this person can say yes to eternal recurrence. They can say yes to their life exactly as it is, because they're living their life, not someone else's script. The ultimate gift of absurdity is authenticity. When you can't appeal to cosmic meaning, social conformity, or external authority, when you're standing unclothed before existence knowing it's absurd, you have no choice but to be authentic. And authenticity, existential psychology tells us, is the foundation of psychological health. The neuroses, anxieties, and depressions that fill therapists' offices are often symptoms of inauthenticity, of living according to meanings we don't actually believe, conforming to expectations that violate our true nature, running from the freedom and responsibility that absurdity demands we embrace. So, here's the final revelation, the most important thing anyone could possibly tell you about your life. Right now, you're probably living according to meanings you've inherited, pursuing goals someone else decided were worthwhile, measuring your life against standards you never consciously chose. And deep down, you know this. You've felt that nagging sense that you're playing a role, rather than living your truth, that you're following a script rather than authoring your own story. That feeling, that discomfort, that's not your enemy. That's the gift of absurdity calling to you, inviting you to wake up, to see through the illusions of inherited meaning, to embrace the terrifying and liberating truth that you are free. The question isn't whether life is absurd. It is. The question is, how will you receive absurdity, as the curse it appears to be or as the gift it actually is? Will you spend your life clinging to false certainties, living within unpleasant faith as Sartre would say, pretending you're not free when you are? Or will you have the courage to embrace absurdity, to accept that you're the author of your meaning, to live authentically in full knowledge that nothing is guaranteed, nothing is permanent, and nothing is cosmically certain? Because here's what the existential psychologists discovered through decades of working with people in crisis, the ones who find the deepest meaning, the most profound joy, the most authentic lives, they're not the ones who successfully avoided absurdity. They're the ones who looked absurdity in the face and said yes anyway. They're the ones who rolled their boulder up the mountain fully aware it would roll back down, and they did it with commitment, with the knowledge that the meaning isn't in reaching some imaginary destination but in the rolling itself, in the choosing, in the living. Viktor Frankl, who had seen humanity at its worst and its best, who had every reason to despair and instead chose meaning, left us with this profound insight: between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That space, that power to choose, that's the gift of absurdity. Use it. Your life is waiting for you to create it. If this exploration into the liberating gift of life's absurdity resonated with something deep within you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Join this community of people who are brave enough to question everything and authentic enough to create their own meanings. Share this video with someone who questions purpose and meaning, someone who needs to hear that their existential crisis might actually be the beginning of their liberation. And leave a comment below telling me, what meaning are you creating in your life right now, knowing it's your creation and yours alone? I genuinely want to know how you're embracing your freedom. Remember, Sisyphus is rolling that boulder right now, and he's smiling. Will you join him?